Hey guys, Chris here tonight. I am in the Sierra Nevada in a beautiful meadow. I was here last time, and we have a story about two young ladies who go on a simple day hike in the Adirondak Mountains of upstate New York. And there, they get into some trouble. They have to spend the night unexpectedly, and while they're spending the night, something reveals itself from the forest, and it's extremely frightening. That's next. Okay, so I am in this aspen forest, and then there's pine over here with heavy duty boulders again. Massive boulders. I may need to hunker down next to one of these massive boulders to get out of this breeze, but it's a really interesting forest. And I saw this section of downed aspen trees all kind of down at the same time in the same location. And also, look at this. This is interesting. We got a aspen tree break right here. Look at that. Interesting. It's broke about, I want to say 7 or 8 feet up. Right there though, see that? And you can see there's still leaves on it like it was growing. I don't know how recent this was, but really wild. Okay, so I found a nice spot. There's no wind back here. It's pretty quiet. I can hear the highway way off in the distance, and I got aspen trees all around me, meadows over there, giant boulders in this very, very dark forest. Very thick, very dark forest, but we got an open meadow this way, so we're in good shape. Also, speaking of good shape, we have Anderson Valley Brewing Company. This is called Summer Solstice, and that has a cool looking bear, and summer is wrapping up, and this is a 5% alcohol by volume ale with natural flavors, and this is what it says. Affectionately known as summer in a can, our summer solstice is both quaffable, not sure what that means, and full flavored with notes of vanilla, caramel, cream, coffee. This beer, the bear threw me off. This beer pairs perfectly with bathing suits, weekend camping trips, backyard barbecues, and all the best memories of summertime. So that's all in a can. That's pretty amazing. They could put all of those memories in a can of beer. So I don't know, we better check that out. But I do like that. Notes of vanilla, caramel, cream, and coffee. That sounds good. Sounds good to me. Good sound to it. And that is out of Boonville, California. Cheers. Ooh. Wow. Almost a buttery finish to it. That is really interesting. It's not bitter at all. I can hardly taste the alcohol. Real, kind of a lightly sweet aroma. Nothing bitter about it. It's really actually pretty good. And I can kind of taste the caramel, cream, and coffee. Just very faint, very light, but it's definitely there, and it's not overpowering. So there you go. Anderson Valley Summer Solstice. Cheers. Or cheers. So this story I'm about to tell you, it kind of reminds me of a story I did a couple years ago about a mother and daughter who went hiking in northern Utah in the Uinta Mountains, real high up there, the high Uintas, and they got caught up in a snowstorm, a late season snowstorm, and they got off on the wrong trail and they got completely lost and went missing. Really a tragic story. And the similarity is these two young ladies, Paige and Linda, were going to the Adirondack Mountains of New York State. The Adirondacks are very interesting mountains. Upstate New York, They're not a part of the Appalachians. This almost round, slightly oblong mountain range next to Vermont, south of Canada, Quebec, and Ontario. 6 million acres. It's huge. A lot of it's public, much of it's private, and there's 3,000 miles of rivers and streams, 100 peaks, the highest peak being Mt Marcy at 5,344 feet, highest point in the Adirondacks and the state of New York. Great hiking country, canoe country, beautiful fall colors, deciduous, pine, mixed forest, and these beautiful river valleys. And this is where Paige and Linda wanted to do a day hike back in 2001, late that summer, and they made, according to them, some mistakes. And I thought about their mistakes, and I think we can kind of forgive them a little bit because they were thinking, they just didn't think through all the scenarios that could have happened to them, and they ended up having to spend the night. And they weren't expecting that. The temperatures were going to be in the 50s, maybe low 60s, so they brought light jackets. Mistake number one. Did not bring a compass. They thought it would be an easy in, easy out trail. Didn't think much of it. They brought a limited amount of water, half a gallon between them, I believe, and some light snacks, a couple apples, trail bars. They just didn't think they were going to be out. And they thought, we'll just come back, we'll have dinner out, and just be a nice late morning, afternoon day hike. So they head out to this trailhead. They're heading up, and everything's going great. And then about 2 in the afternoon, the blue sky with the white puffy clouds, all of a sudden it just slowly switches over, and now it's dark gray, and the wind kicked up, and this light rain started falling. And they realized after a couple hours they were lost. They had gone on this trail, and they made a couple of logistical errors at a couple of key junctions. Now, I don't know if there was signage, they didn't have a map or a compass, and they felt comfortable enough to just go down this trail, and they missed a couple of spots, and they realized they were lost. They were still on the trail, but they had no idea how to get back. They came from the southwest, and they were heading, they didn't know where. They felt it was like north, northeast, but they couldn't tell. They had no compass, and it was dark, and the wind was kicking up, and the sun was going down, and they thought, we might have to spend the night out here. We are not prepared for this. They had a small flashlight, and with the rain and the wind just totally blasting up on this mountain they were on, they went into this forest, kind of like I am here, and they kind of worked their way back into a thick area and got off the trail and thought, we got to make some kind of a shelter. So they went to a pine tree and started breaking off some pine boughs and stacking them up. And then they looked around and they found a pretty good sized down tree, and then a big pine tree, very thick pine tree that they could use as a windbreak. And then they put these pine boughs up against this downed tree, and they had kind of a little quasi windbreak shelter. Nothing to write home about, but the rain had let up, but the ground was now wet, and they were wet and very uncomfortable. The temperatures dropped 10-15 degrees that night on them. Wind was howling overhead, and they were guessing 40, maybe 50 miles an hour. It's now dark, and the moon was intermittently showing the moonlight coming through. It was like this half moon, the waning moon, but there was enough light on it that they could see occasionally because the wind was blowing these clouds across the sky. So they're in this makeshift shelter that they built The wind is just screaming over the top of them. The whole forest is making all this barrage of sounds, creaking, cracking, groaning of trees moving in the wind, branches and pine boughs, and they're just hunkering down, doing the best they can, and they're thinking, we just have to get through the night. It's not winter, it's not going to snow on us, it's late summer, we're going to get through this somehow, but we're going to get through this. And they had this little flashlight, and they only used it when they got their water, and they didn't want to spill the water, so they would shine it on each other when they were getting food and water, and then they would take turns, and they were sharing all the food that they had and the water and making the best of things. And just thinking, we just got to stick together, keep our heads about us, and keep cool, or keep warm, actually. And they stayed close together, and it wasn't freezing temps or anything. It was just really frightening for them to just be in the dark, and then this moon just occasionally hitting the ground here and there because of the clouds moving by. Just then, about 11 o'clock, they heard in the wind, but it rose above the wind, this horrific scream. It sounded like, according to Linda, a cross between a witch and a woman being murdered. Absolutely terrifying. Right then, Linda had a hard time catching her breath. She had so much fear. It's like, oh my God, did you hear that? There's something out there screaming. And at first they thought, is that the wind? Are we misidentifying this? This is crazy. And they know that, no, this was not the wind. They'd been hearing the wind all afternoon and evening and that night. And now this something is out there. They couldn't see it. They couldn't hear anything else. And they just hunkered down, and they wanted to keep that flashlight off because they didn't want whatever was screaming to see them, to see where they were. And it lasted 7-8 seconds, then it was done. They're sitting in a shelter, eyes are wide. Occasionally they can see each other's face, otherwise it's very dark in there. And then about 11:45 that night, they heard, a little bit closer now, this deep, guttural, almost like an ugh sound, like ugh, ugh. Really creepy. And that, for sure, they knew was an animal or something, and they immediately just huddled together some more and just were like, oh my gosh, this is incredible what we're dealing with. Not only do we have a storm, spending the night, not prepared, and now there's something out there. And they're hoping it was a bear. At the very least, it was a bear. They had no idea. And then Paige decided to slide up over the downed tree and the pine boughs that they had. Linda stayed down, and she looked and was scanning this small clearing, kind of like I got over here. There's a nice little clearing, and then it's forest all around. And she's looking, and this was very dark, and then all of a sudden the moon popped through some of the clouds, and she could see this massive dark figure, this dark shadow against this tree line in the other side of this clearing. And it was just standing there with these big, broad shoulders. And she said, oh God, there's something over there. And it started moving just a little bit like this. And then she popped back down. And she said, it's moving, it's moving. And they both looked at each other. And they could see each other because the cloud could cleared, and there was some light there. And then they both slowly got up and looked across this little clearing, and whatever it was gone. And they dropped back down, and Paige had tears in her eyes. Linda was comforting her, and she was holding her, and they were just trying to get through the night, and this stuff is happening around them. And whatever this was now knew where they were because it saw them and they saw it. So they're back down in this makeshift shelter. Wind is still howling. It's dark. Clouds are periodically revealing some moonlight. And now there's something in the forest that knows they're there. They're thinking, I don't know if we can stay around. Paige was saying, I don't know if I want to stay here. I don't know if we can stay here the rest of the night. I want to get out of here. The fight or flight. The flight was really kicking in big time with Paige. Linda was saying, honey, just slow down. Let's take a deep breath. Let's just stay together. Let's just stay together. We can't go running off into the forest at night. At least not yet. They waited until about 12:30, almost 1 in the morning, and they were checking the watch. And they could see the time, and they started to see more stars in the sky, and they were getting a little bit of hope, and it had been quiet around as far as the sounds that they had been hearing, and they were thinking, maybe we'll get a break here. And then the clouds cleared, rain was done, and the wind was dying down. Still very spooky. Something's out there. And about 1 in the morning, they heard what they thought was talking. And at first, they both felt, is that people looking for us? Maybe a rescue party? And they heard this almost like gibberish, this chatter. Pretty quiet at first, pretty faint, off to the what they thought was the north, in this direction where they saw the silhouette. And it was getting louder. And it didn't make any sense. This gibberish that they were hearing, this language, it was not animal speak, but it was not intelligible. It was not human. Very frightening. And then it started to get louder, and it was almost as if one of them was shouting at the other, or others. They didn't know, but they heard quieter tones and deeper, like something shouting, yelling at something. Really freaky. Paige is like, I am out. I can't do this. I'm going to start shutting down or something. This is terrible. Just extreme. And they could see with the moonlight, it was easier to see, and then they just were waiting to get some kind of a break, just a little more time or anything. This sound, this gibberish persisted. Every 15, 20 minutes, they'd hear it for a couple minutes, then it'd be quiet, then it would move, it would be somewhere else, and then it would be in an opposite direction an hour later. About 4 in the morning, they said, okay, it's 4:15, let's get out of here. They could see with the moon where it was heading. They knew this had to be the southwest, behind them and down. And that's where they had come from, was the southwest. And they thought, we got to go at some point anyways. It's 4:15, it'll be 4:30, and 5:30, 6 o'clock, quarter to 6, the sun will start coming up. And so they started moving down the mountain. Arm in arm, together, not running, not in a panic, filled with fear. This sound, this chatter, gibberish sound, that was how they described it. This is actually a real thing with Sasquatch, cryptids, Bigfoot. It's called samurai chatter. And it's some kind of form of communication. The Sierra Sounds revealed some of this. And it's pretty wild. And as they're heading down the mountain, working their way towards anything that resembles civilization, a road, a house, just a view, seeing something off in the distance, anything, they could hear this chatter stay with them. This gibberish chatter, samurai chatter. It never got closer. It never seemed to go too far away. It just stayed with them as they worked their way down the mountain. It was still dark, and they were moving pine boughs out of the way, but they could see somewhat with the moon. Wind had died down, and they were drenched because all the trees were, pine boughs were putting water on their clothing, and they were miserable, but happy to be moving down the mountain. 2 hours of this, and then it was 5:45, 5:30, and they could see a glimpse of light on the horizon, and they knew that had to be east, and they felt they were going in a right direction. They were totally off trail, and they got this sense of calm and joy come over them, particularly after they realized that this chatter sound was no longer heard. They hadn't heard it in several minutes. The sun's coming up over here, sound has gone away, and they're moving down the mountain, walking side by side, finished off all their water and their food. They came up this ridge, down the other side, and they looked down and they could see a highway. It looked like it was going east, west, and they wondered, is that the highway we even came in on? They weren't sure, but they were just happy to see a highway. It took them 45 more minutes to work themselves down to this highway, relieved to be on the highway out of the woods, and they waited for a car to come by. It was early in the morning, and then they looked up and they saw a pickup truck come over this rise, around this bend, and come right by them. They flagged him down, waved him down, and he fortunately stopped for them. They said, "Could we please get a ride? I think our car's up ahead. We've had an ordeal. We had to survive the night out here." And they essentially told him what had happened after they got in. And he said, yes, I can take you wherever you need to go. If you need to go to town, but we'll try to find your car. And so they worked their way down the highway, and they realized, they saw a couple of signs, and they realized they were on the right route. They had to take a turn, and they went down, and he brought them right to their vehicle. They were so relieved that this ordeal was done. It's like a double survival story. Overnight with cryptids, Bigfoot, as well as being lost in the forest. It's like double nightmare stuff. And no wonder they felt so ill prepared, and they were really kind of down on themselves because they said, mistake number 1, we didn't bring enough clothing. Mistake number 2, we didn't have a compass. Mistake number 3, we didn't have enough food and water. But they brought a little bit of everything. Who expects that they're going to be out in a storm overnight? And I don't always bring stuff to spend the night with. I don't have a tent or a sleeping bag in my backpack behind me here, and yet they were kind of down. I guess it's hindsight. Sure as hell better be 2020. We're going to learn from this one way or the other, because we ain't letting this happen again, for God's sakes. And so they were going to be prepared going forward. And there's always got to be a takeaway if you're smart, because we ain't going to do this twice if we don't have to. So they were prepared the next time. This is what they said after their ordeal. We know we saw and heard Bigfoot that night. The dimensions of the figure we saw standing in the trees was unbelievable. It looked like a sheet of plywood standing on 2 legs, being both tall and wide. But then it moved, and we realized that we were dealing with something very large and very dangerous and very frightening. Had there not been so much noise from the wind and the trees, I am confident we would have heard them moving. But it was impossible under the conditions we found ourselves in. It seemed they were following us or escorting us out of the forest, a fact which we will never know, but had they wanted to attack us, they could have, but they didn't. Really interesting. They gave Bigfoot, Sasquatch, whatever this was, credit, because they felt so vulnerable with their situation that they knew whatever this was could have easily surrounded and just made them disappear, and it didn't. It just seemed to kind of want to make sure that they left the building. Elvis has left the building. Or Elvises, two of them, two female Elvises. That is our story from Paige and Linda from the Adirondacks of New York State. And the sun has now officially gone behind that ridge. I got to hike out. I got maybe a half a mile, got plenty of light, and I think what we're going to do is cook some street tacos off the bumper again. It's kind of fun cooking off the bumper. Now I have to carry all this stuff into the forest and set up some makeshift camp. Yeah, we're going to go do that. And I'll take you guys on a little hike out through the forest here. It's a pretty interesting forest. There's a lot of things going on. I hear birds squawking behind me, and with these weird broken trees and down trees and just this thick boulders and stuff, it'd be easy to have things hide out here. I don't know. I don't know if I'd want to spend the night out here, but I'm very curious about this place, so I will be back. So, all right, let's go. Okay, so you can see how thick these aspen groves are. Look at this. It's just really thick back in here. Crazy. I switched my jackets out. I did bring an extra jacket. And these things are so light, and with the puffy jackets like this, you can just tuck them in the bottom of your pack. You don't even know they're there, weight-wise, space-wise. So why not? Especially when you know it's going to be cooler in the evening. Look how dark it is back here. It is dark in the forest. And this forest over here, look at that. Right there, it's very dark. I think that's why I like this meadow, is it just gives me a little break here of light. And we are getting some sun up on the peak right there. There it is. Right there is the peak. I think that's Hawkins Peak. Pretty sure. There's two of them, Pickett's and Hawkins. One here and the other one's over that way. So, all right. Okay, so I just gotta work my way through this forest here and work my way up to the truck. And this is the granite boulders again, and more aspen and pine mixed in here. Really cool forest. I really like this. It's huge windbreaks all around. Love it. Okay, we are back, and it is time for street tacos. Off the tailgate, too, so. We got extra virgin olive oil, should be good and safe, healthy, all that fun. All right, we got Thomas Farms grass-fed ground beef. Yeehaw! And my hands have been washed. And we're just going to take about half of this, put it on the old skillet here. There we go. This browns so quickly on these little propane stoves. Look at that. It's really coming together nicely. I have some nice cheesy taco seasoning to add to it. That will help out, as well as just a little salt and pepper. And then we got Mission street tacos. Those will serve us just perfectly. Have a couple, 3 of those, and that will do it. Get the seasoning in. We're just going to go about half of the seasoning for half a pound of beef here. I just love tomatoes on my deli wraps, my tuna wraps, tacos, grilled cheese sandwiches. I'm a tomato person, for sure. So we're going to cut this up pretty fine, because the street tacos are not very big. That's why we can have lots of them. Alright, we got some shredded cheese, some mild salsa from the deli, so there we go. So I failed to bring a plate, so we are going to put the tacos on the makeshift plate of the Coleman lid, a little mini cooler lid, so there we go. Thing is with street tacos, you don't need a whole lot. Just like that. Always have to have a little salsa. Very similar to tomatoes, it's just spicier. A little more kick to it. There you go. All right, there you go. Street tacos. BaseCamp tacos. There you go. Okay, guys, I am all cleaned up, ready to go here. I got a couple, 3 miles to head down this dirt road and then back home. Base camp home. So, all right, you guys, thank you for watching. That was a lot of fun. And I didn't feel nearly as spooked in this forest tonight. You're fine until you're not fine, so I know how that goes. But, yeah, very beautiful forest here tonight. And I think I'll be back. I'd like to go a little further deeper into that forest and explore those giant granite boulders and those. There was like cave-like structures in there. It was really cool. So if you guys like what I do, like and subscribe. You guys know how to do all that. And we will see you in the next video. As always, keep hiking and take it easy. In the words of Crocodile Dundee, that's not a pine cone. Now that's a pine cone.